Some journeys can change your destiny. Others change the way we see the world. This is one of them. Norway, a journey from north to south. Episode 2. Central Norway, the Kingdom of the Fjords. We begin our journey through the Trøndelag region in Trondheim itself, its main city, and one of the country's great historical and cultural centers. Founded in 997 by King Olav Tryggvason, Trondheim was established along the banks of the Nidelva River and quickly became an important center of trade. And right away, one of the things that catches the eye most are these wooden buildings in shades of red, yellow, green, and white that line the banks of the Nidelva River. Known as brygging, these buildings served as commercial warehouses, receiving goods that arrived by water, and connecting Trondheim to the region's trade routes. Many of the warehouses we see today were rebuilt or preserved after fires repeatedly struck the city, maintaining an architectural tradition that spans several centuries. At the heart of Trondheim stands Nidaros Cathedral, built over the tomb of Saint Olav, the Viking king who became the patron saint of Norway. Construction began around 1070, and during the Middle Ages, Nidaros became one of the most important pilgrimage destinations in Northern Europe. Built in the 17th century, Kristiansten Fortress was erected to protect the city from possible attacks coming from the east. Centuries later, the old fortress ceased to be a military installation, and today serves as a historical landmark, cultural space, and one of the best viewpoints over Trondheim. In the middle of the Trondheim's fjord, just a few kilometers from downtown Trondheim, Munkholmen appears as a small island that for centuries held a strategic position for the city. The site has served as a Benedictine monastery, fortress, and prison, and once housed political prisoners, including the famous Danish Count Peder Schumacher Griffenfeld, who spent nearly 2 decades imprisoned on this small island. The buildings we see today mainly date from the period when the island was transformed into a fortification, beginning in the 17th century, when its position in the fjord became even more important for the defense of Trondheim. The town of Røros grew around copper mining that began in the 17th century, and today it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site with hundreds of historic buildings. At the highest point of the town stands Røros Church, completed in 1784 during the height of the mining industry. Nearby begins the story of Storwarts, one of the most important areas of the old copper mining industry, where mining developed from the 17th century onward and helped sustain the town for more than 3 centuries. Today, Storwarts is no longer an active mine. Copper mining in the region ended in 1977, and what remains are tunnels, buildings, and marks across the landscape that have transformed the former industrial area into a true open-air museum. The dark wooden houses found throughout the town are not simply an aesthetic choice. Many have retained facades naturally darkened by time, contributing to the almost medieval appearance that has made Røros so different from other Norwegian towns. In southern Trøndelag, Oppdal serves as one of the main gateways to the great mountain system of Dovrefjell. Winters can be extremely harsh, and the region is also known for its long tradition of winter sports, and as one of the access points to areas where the enormous muskoxen still live. Within Dovrefjell National Park, Snøhetta is recognized as the highest mountain in Dovrefjell and one of the great natural landmarks of central Norway. Nearby are trails, shelters, and accommodation options for those who come here with a special goal: trying to find the muskoxen, the only wild population of this species found in Norway. These animals seem as if they have stepped out of another era, yet they continue to live in the mountains of Dovrefjell, alongside wild reindeer and other species adapted to the alpine environment. And at the end of the hike stands the Snøhetta Viewpoint, a small pavilion of steel and wood designed by the Snøhetta architecture firm, created specifically to admire this landscape without competing with it. Innerdalen is considered one of Norway's most beautiful alpine valleys, surrounded by rugged mountains, lakes, and a landscape shaped by the action of ice over thousands of years. At the heart of the valley lies Lake Innerdalsvatnet, with the famous Dalatornet mountain rising dramatically in the background, towering over the landscape and becoming one of Innerdalen's most recognizable symbols. Continuing through the mountains of Møre og Romsdal, we reach Eikesdalen, where we find one of Norway's most impressive waterfalls. Steinsdalsfossen plunges down an enormous rock face for about 655 meters, with a free fall of approximately 297 meters. There is an interesting detail. Much of the waterfall's water is used to generate electricity, and its maximum flow is released only during the summer, between June and August. In the municipality of Verdal, the village of Stiklestad preserves one of the most decisive episodes in Norwegian history. It was here that King Olav Haraldsson died in 1030, in a battle that helped consolidate Norway as a Christian kingdom. Today, the Stiklestad National Culture Center preserves this history in a large open-air museum, with around 30 historic buildings and spaces that recreate different periods of life in the region. And the story comes to life every year in Stiklestad's large amphitheater, where the play about Saint Olav has been performed at the very site of the battle since 1954. During the summer, the medieval farm of Stiklastadir also hosts activities, crafts, storytelling, and experiences that transport visitors back to Norway 1,000 years ago. Leka, in the far north of Trøndelag, is one of those places where the history of the Earth itself seems to be exposed on the surface, with rocks revealing an ancient section of oceanic crust. The island is home to the so-called Leka ophiolite, a rare geological formation created by tectonic processes associated with the closure of an ancient ocean hundreds of millions of years ago. Among its formations are ultramafic rocks such as peridotite, which originated deep beneath the Earth's surface and help geologists study materials associated with the Earth's mantle. It is precisely this combination of oceanic rocks, mantle materials, and coastal landscapes that makes Leka one of the most geologically extraordinary places in all of Norway. It is in the Møre og Romsdal region that we find Ålesund, a city shaped by the sea and spread across the surrounding landscape, where the harbor and mountains form part of the urban scenery itself. What stands out most is the architecture of the city center. Rebuilt in the Art Nouveau style after the Great Fire of 1904, which destroyed around 850 houses and left thousands of residents homeless. Today, this combination of canals, ornate buildings, and a location surrounded by fjords has transformed Ålesund into one of the main tourist gateways to the Norwegian coast, even welcoming large cruise ships. At the top of Mount Axla, the Fjellstua viewpoint offers one of the most impressive views of Ålesund, revealing the city center, its islands, and the mountains surrounding the archipelago all at once. At the northwestern tip of Godoya Island, Alnes Lighthouse watches over a coastline that for centuries was closely connected to fishing and the difficult navigation of the open sea. The current lighthouse was built in 1937, but the history of navigation lights at Alnes began much earlier, back in 1853, with a small light powered by just 3 tallow candles. Today, the lighthouse is automated, and the old complex has been transformed into a cultural space, with a museum, exhibitions, and a cafe, keeping alive the memory of one of Sunnmøre's historic fishing communities. After traveling through the mountains along winding roads, we reach the Hardanger Fjord, one of Norway's most famous fjords and part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2005. Carved by successive ice ages, the fjord is surrounded by rock walls rising to around 1,400 meters above sea level and plunging hundreds of meters below the surface. This landscape also explains why the small village of Hardanger receives so many visitors, especially during the cruise season, when large ships enter the narrow fjord surrounded by mountains. But among so many waterfalls, none is as famous as the Seven Sisters, formed by 7 streams cascading down the mountainsides, with an average drop of around 250 meters. The amount of water flowing over the Seven Sisters changes considerably depending on snowmelt and rainfall, which is why the 7 waterfalls do not always appear with the same force throughout the year. And there is even an old legend explaining the names. On the opposite side of the fjord stands the suitor, who supposedly tried to win the Seven Sisters over, but failed. Shortly after leaving the valleys behind, the road begins climbing the mountainside toward Trolltunga, one of Norway's most famous mountain roads, built to overcome terrain that seemed almost impossible to cross. 11 tight hairpin turns zigzag up the mountain, leading travelers to the Trolltunga Plateau, about 858 meters above sea level, where the road seems to disappear among the mountains. The landscape becomes even more impressive on the plateau, where walkways and modern viewpoints extend over the void, allowing visitors to look down on the entire route from above. Along the way, water also follows the climb up the mountain, and Stegastein plunges beside the road, crossed by a stone bridge built as part of the route itself. Trolltunga was opened in 1936 by King Haakon VII, and nearly a century later, it remains one of Norway's great road attractions, receiving more than 1 million visitors in a single year. Aurlandsfjellet is a small town in the heart of Romsdalen, surrounded by some of the most dramatic mountain landscapes in Møre og Romsdal. And known as the mountaineering capital of Norway. Because of its location where the fjord meets the great mountain valleys, the town has become one of the main gateways to hiking trails, climbing routes, and adventures throughout the Romsdalen region. High above the mountain, Rampestreken extends out over the void at about 537 meters above Aurlandsfjellet, creating the sensation of being suspended above the valley. From the platform, the view opens toward the Romsdalsfjord, the Romsdalen Valley, and the enormous mountain walls that have made this region one of Norway's great mountaineering destinations. The Atlantic Road is one of the most spectacular coastal roads in Norway and in the world, connecting small islands and skerries with bridges that seem to rise directly from the ocean. The most famous section jumps from island to island across 7 bridges, but the complete road stretches for 36 kilometers between Korvåg and the former fishing village of Bud. At Myrbergholm Bridge, the road features special walkways for fishermen, allowing them to cast their lines directly into the ocean without having to compete for space with cars. Construction began in 1983, and when it opened in 1989, there was finally a road connection between Averøy and the mainland, transforming life for the communities in the region. And there is a curiosity that fits these images perfectly. During storms, the same bridges that appear delicate under the sunlight are exposed to the full force of the waves and winds of the North Atlantic. Byholmen is a fishing village at the northern tip of Smula Island, connected to the mainland by a dramatic road nearly 10 kilometers long, crossing bridges, small islets, and breakwaters. The place was once the largest fishing village south of Lofoten, and is still considered the largest active fishing village in Norway, south of the Arctic Circle. Throughout the year, only around 200 residents endure the harsh winter, but during the summer, the village comes alive, and its population rises to more than 2,000 people. Drawn by coastal tourism. According to a local guide, during storms, so much salt is carried through the air, and streets that young people with braces need to keep their mouths closed to prevent the metal from rusting. In the county of Vestland, in the small village of Lærdal, stands Borgundstave Church. Built around the year 1200, it is considered the best preserved wooden church in the entire country, surviving 8 centuries and watching almost all the others disappear, with only 28 remaining throughout Norway today. Its 7-tiered roof is crowned with carved dragon heads, in a style that directly echoes the art of the ancient Viking ships. Surrounding the building is an old cemetery that is still active today, mixing centuries-old gravestones weathered by time with recent graves decorated with fresh flowers. Bergen is Norway's second-largest city, and during the Middle Ages became the country's largest city and one of the main commercial centers of Scandinavia. Few people realize that Bergen was also Norway's first capital, when the city became the seat of the monarchy and one of the most important political centers of the medieval kingdom. Surrounded by 7 mountains and situated between the Sognefjord and the Hardanger Fjord, Bergen gained a privileged position that transformed the city into the main gateway to the great fjords of western Norway. Because of its geography, Bergen is one of the rainiest cities in Europe, which helps explain the intense green that covers its hillsides for much of the year. Stalheimskleiva is one of Norway's most impressive historic roads, with tight curves climbing the mountainside toward the top of the Neroydalen Valley. Along the way, 2 waterfalls plunge down from the mountains, while the road leads to Stalheim, where one of the region's most striking landscapes unfolds. Gudvangen lies in the heart of the Fjord, in one of the narrowest branches of the Great Sognefjord system, and for centuries has served as a stopping point for those navigating through this valley. Today, the small village is also known for Njardarheimer, a Viking settlement built as a living history experience, where the craftsmanship, architecture, food, and customs of the Viking Age are presented in an interactive way. And for many travelers, Gudvangen becomes more than just a stop along the way, because from here it is possible to combine the Viking experience with a cruise through the Fjord, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Nestled in the heart of the fjords, between steep mountains and emerald green waters, the village of Flom is a historic settlement that serves as a gateway to the Fjord. Visitors can enjoy unforgettable experiences ranging from the legendary journey aboard the steep Flom Railway to tasting traditional brown cheese in an environment surrounded by waterfalls and monumental nature. About 650 meters above the Aurlandsfjellet, the Stegastein viewpoint stands out, designed to extend from the mountainside like a bridge reaching out into the void. The structure was built from wood and steel, and its design ends in a transparent edge that creates the sensation of floating above the valley. From here, the Aurlandsfjord unfolds between steep mountains, while the small village of Aurland appears far below, alongside the waters of the fjord. The platform is part of the Aurlandsfjellet scenic route, and has become one of the best-known viewpoints for taking in the landscapes of the Norwegian fjords. Aurlandsfjellet is one of Norway's most spectacular national scenic routes, stretching for 47 kilometers between Lærdalsøri and Aurlandsfjellet. Known as the Snow Road, the route reaches an elevation of about 1,308 meters and crosses a landscape where snow remains for much of the year. As the road climbs, the landscape changes dramatically, transitioning from green valleys and forests to rocky, almost barren terrain above the tree line. One of the most curious details is that the road is normally closed during the winter, when snow completely transforms this section of the mountain and can remain for several months. The Sognefjord is the largest and deepest fjord in Norway, extending approximately 205 kilometers inland from the coast to the area around Skjolden. In some sections, its waters reach depths of more than 1,300 meters, creating a striking contrast between the fjord and the enormous mountains surrounding it. Hopperstad Stave Church is another example of Norway's medieval black stave churches, built with massive wooden structures and techniques that have endured for centuries. Originally built around 1130, it is among the oldest preserved stave churches in the country and contains elements that date back to medieval Norse architecture. One curious detail is that the building we see today underwent a major restoration in the 19th century, when missing sections were reconstructed based on surviving remains and historical references. Its location in Vik, surrounded by fields and mountains along the Sognefjord, helps explain why these churches were also central gathering places for ancient Norwegian rural communities. Steinsdalsfossen is one of Norway's most unusual waterfalls because a trail allows visitors to walk behind the waterfall and observe the cascading water from the other side. About 50 meters high, its waters descend over a rocky wall before continuing toward the Hardanger Fjord. The path behind the waterfall turns the visit into an unusual experience, especially when the wind carries tiny droplets of water through the passage. The flow of Steinsdalsfossen varies throughout the year, following the snowmelt and rainfall that feed the watercourse in the mountains. The beautiful and impressive Hardanger Bridge is one of Vestland's great engineering achievements. At 1,380 meters long, With a main span of 1,310 meters, it crosses the Fjord. What is most impressive is the sense of emptiness beneath the bridge. No pillars touch the water, while the enormous 200-meter towers support the entire structure from the shores. And there is an even more cinematic detail. The road practically emerges from inside the mountain and leads directly onto the bridge, thanks to the tunnels built at both ends. When a vehicle leaves the darkness of the tunnel and suddenly encounters the enormous suspended span over the fjord, the transition between rock, water, and engineering creates one of the most impressive road passages in Norway. Vøringsfossen is one of the most famous waterfalls in all of Norway, plunging about 182 meters from the Hardanger Bridge plateau into the Mobodalen Valley. The scenery became even more spectacular with the observation platforms and the staircase-shaped bridge built across the gorge, allowing visitors to admire the waterfall from different angles. The bridge is 47 meters long and has 99 steps, creating a suspended pathway above the gorge, where the water plunges below. In winter, the waterfall itself can become partially or completely frozen, while snow covers the surrounding landscape and completely transforms the scenery at Vøringsfossen. And we arrive at Trolltunga, one of the most impressive and photographed places in Norway, where an enormous slab of granite projects about 700 meters above the waters of Aurlandsfjellet. This formation was carved by glaciers during the ice ages, which deepened the valley and helped expose the great rock wall where the famous Trolltunga remains suspended. Despite its challenging appearance, the hike itself is considered more demanding than simply reaching the rock's tip. And today, the full route can be as long as 27 kilometers and take between 8 and 12 hours. But all that effort is rewarded with an extraordinary view of the valley and Aurlandsfjellet, stretching between the mountains like a landscape sculpted by ancient glaciers. Låtefossen is one of Hardanger's most famous waterfalls, formed by two separate cascades that merge as they plunge about 165 meters down the mountainside. Its fame among travelers began as early as the 19th century, when tourists arrived by horse-drawn carriage from Odda to admire the power of its waters. In 1859, the stone bridge crossing the river directly in front of the waterfall was completed, creating one of the most striking scenes along Norway's early tourist routes. Today, Låtefossen remains a classic stop along the road between Odda and Rildal, precisely because the waterfall seems to emerge right beside the highway. The Steinelva River runs through the valley of the same name, winding between fields, forests, and mountains before reaching the Fjord. Its waters take on that characteristic blue-green color mainly because of glacial sediments carried downstream by the melting mountain ice. Throughout the valley, the river sustains an agricultural landscape that for centuries has combined the presence of water with small rural communities. Lovatnet is a glacial lake in the Lodalen Valley, fed by meltwater from Jostedalsbreen, the largest ice cap in continental Europe. Its blue-green color comes from extremely fine rock sediments carried by the glacial water, which remain suspended in the lake and alter the way light is reflected. On the shores of the lake stands Breng, an old summer farm dating back to the 14th century that preserves traditional wooden buildings. These small houses with vegetation-covered roofs were used as shelters and facilities for raising animals during the summer months, when farmers brought their livestock to the mountain pastures. But this seemingly peaceful landscape also holds a dramatic history. In 1905 and 1936, landslides from Mount Sognefjord generated enormous waves in Lovatnet, destroying farms and entire communities. Låtefossen Church is one of Norway's most impressive medieval wooden churches, preserving an architectural tradition that has endured for centuries. Originally built in the 12th century, the church was expanded over time and still retains very old sections of its wooden structure. Its carved details reveal a fascinating blend of Christian symbols and motifs from the ancient Norse tradition, showing how different cultures came together in medieval Norway. In the middle of the Lom Valley, surrounded by the mountains of Jotunheimen, the church occupies a setting that connects medieval architecture with the alpine landscape of inland Norway.